Tales by the Blue Light, Episode 6, Past, Present, Future. In a space too far from anything to be nothing, a blue light shines into the void. Through the shadows, shapes appear. People, stories, wonders, and mysteries. Live from Elgin, Illinois at the Blue Box Cafe, it's Tales by the Blue Light. I'm your host, James Wilder. So every month on the show, we showcase a brand new sci-fi, horror, and fantasy story by me, as well as something from our guests if we have any. These stories come from all over time, space, other realities, and they're all called here through this blue light. See, this light's a special one. It bends our world into a place where stories become real, a liminal space where our own dreams can take form. We glide between these realities, these possibilities, and we get stories. So that's what we do here, and we're excited to bring you what we have. But first, I've been trying to contact the dead again. Yes, I know it hasn't worked before, but I think I've really mastered it. See, this time, I have a sacrifice prepared. I'm going to take this bag of chips and use them to summon a ghost. Magic chips, ghost inspectors, come on out, you crinkles matter. Magic chips, call forth the dead. Yummy treats await your end.
I have come.
I did it! I did it! I've contacted a ghost. Finally, I did something right!
I am the ghost of President Grover Cleveland.
Oh my gosh. I got a U.S. president. Okay. Stay cool. This is such an honor, President Cleveland.
Yeah, don't get too excited. I'm here to make a complaint and to eat your chips.
Well, the chips are yours, so go at it.
Oh, hey, don't mind if I do. Now, let me tell you, I've been doing this show for how long now?
Half a year, actually. This is the 6th month we've been performing it here in Elgin, and it's going spectacularly.
Half a year. Half a year, and you haven't mentioned the 1890s.
Yeah, I guess I haven't.
Yeah, I tell you, kid. You need to bring your audience some 1890s related content. It's what the people want. I didn't win 2 terms as president by not knowing the will of the people.
Well, I think I can manage that.
Yeah, well, get at it then.
Well, let's see what we can cull here from the blue light. I've got a story for you. It's a fantasy story, and it definitely has to do with the 1890s.
Give the people what they want.
All right, then. Here's our first tale of the night. A little fantasy story we're calling Stranger in the White City. They held a World's Fair here, you know. Put your cigarette out. The White City, they called it. A big vision of the future. I told you not to smoke around me, Tom. Some vision that turned out to be. I mean, look at this town. I love Chicago. I love it too. But it's crap. Stop being a downer and put out your cigarette. Tom let it droop in his mouth, the smoke curling up into the fading light. Come on, man. Just let me finish it. Everybody used to smoke, you know? Yeah, and they died, which is why I'm left being annoying and telling you to put out the cigarette. He shrugged and flicked the stub into the grass, where I hoped it wouldn't catch the dry grass on fire. Look, all I'm trying to say here is that there's history here, and it pisses me off. I stuffed my hands into the pockets of my jacket and huffed. All right, why does it piss you off? Because everyone has always thought the future would be better. It is better. People don't die from polio anymore. Yeah, and people are now trying to make sure people do die from polio. But what I'm saying is, they didn't just think it would be better. They thought it would be the best. But people aren't that great. We can always do better. We can never actually be the best we can because we get scared and tear it all down. Anytime there's change, it's just... Look, during the fair, there were sights no one had seen before. It put forth this vision of a new kind of city where people could live in wonder and freedom. But during the fair, this serial killer named H.H. Holmes was operating, running this hotel where he murdered people. Look, you get what I'm saying. I get what you're saying, but... Fire! Tom looked at where his cigarette had been. The grass around it was smoldering. He cursed and stomped his foot on it over and over. He put it out and looked back at me, but I was already walking away. Come on, Joss, don't be like that. Good night, Tom. I'm tired of all this doom and gloom about the world. The sun was setting anyway. I may love Chicago, but I didn't love it that much. Jackson Park was beautiful any time, day or night, but I'd misjudged the time. The darkness swept around me so hard I had to catch my breath. A heaving, sudden nighttime that grabbed me by the sternum and slid me forward along the grass. The sky was gone. Only that deep and unforgiving dark left. I'd never seen the sky in Chicago so empty, like it had just been erased. All I could see was that blackness, the graft that shifted lazily under my feet like it was hanging underwater, and the Golden Republic statue. How did she get there? The pressure closed in on my chest and I stumbled towards her, the only anchor I could find. It occurred to me that I was having some sort of attack or episode, that something was wrong, that I was losing my way in the world. But then I heard the voice. "Hey, mister, you want to buy a hot dog? It's fresh Vienna beef." The Republic loomed over me, her arms raised. She shone. I turned to the voice. The man was wearing a striped shirt and speaking between a lit cigarette. He had a push cart of hot dogs, the smell wafting off of them. Maybe if I had something to eat, I'd feel better. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $5, holding it out to the man, who looked down at it and shook his head. "Look, you want to try to give me fake cash, you've got to do better than that. You try that again, you'll get thrown to the Colombian Guard, pal. Hot dogs!" He pushed on as my eyes followed him. He cracked the darkness. The light grew around me. Around me, shadows rose from the ground into forms. There was a woman in a long dress, pushing a baby stroller. Next to her was her husband wearing a 3-piece suit, a rigid mustache on his lips. Hipsters? It became clear soon, as the shadows finished taking their shapes, that this wasn't an aberration. The whole world had become one. The empty grass was filled now with stalls, tents, and buildings. My shoulders brushed passers-by who strolled down along the route. The facades of the buildings were gleaming white in the phosphorescent light shining on them from the night. Formal evening wear was everywhere, as though it had been pulled out of the turn of the last century. Amidst it all, a great wheel turned, a crowded space. The Statue of the Republic still gleamed at me. I had to be going crazy. It looked like it was the Chicago World's Fair. I spun around, taking in every sight, the gleaming domes of the building, the first Ferris wheel turning in the sky, the glow of the lights shining on the lake. My God, this was one hell of a hallucination or dream. You look like this is your first time to the fair, but that can't be because you clearly work here. The woman speaking to me was dressed in a white dress with lace trimmings, a red sash around her waist. The collar to her dress rose up high on her neck, leading to a pale, freckled face with green eyes. She wore a wide-brimmed hat with a red band on her brown-haired head. I don't work here. Did you just get in on a late train? I scrambled to think of what to say. No, I live here. You know how it is. You live in a city your whole life and you never stop to take in the sights, tourists, and all that. She laughed. I've certainly never seen someone dressed as comically as you, though. Is it a Chicago thing? I've only lived here a few days now. Looking around at the clothing around me, a man in sneakers, zip-up jacket, jeans, and t-shirt with the logo from the Doors on it had to look utterly bizarre. It also made me wonder if I wasn't dreaming. The smells, the sights, the wind blowing through my hair, it all felt so real. Maybe I really was in the 1890s. I looked back at the woman and smiled. I'm dressed in the clothes of the future. In 100 years, everyone will be wearing this. She choked back a laugh again. Well, I've seen a lot of things in this fair, but that is certainly the least believable. I shrugged. Well, in 100 years, we'll see who's laughing. But like I said, this is my first time at the fair. What do you think I should see first? She came up next to me and slipped her arm around my elbow. Well, if you'll be my chaperone for the day, I'll gladly introduce you to the exhibits. Sounds good to me. She began leading me towards one of the buildings, which shone with brilliant lights. I think if anything here is worth seeing, it's Mr. Tesla's exhibit. You know, he'll bring all those amazing lights to life. Have you ever seen anything like it? Mr. Tesla hasn't just driven out the night from the room with electric lamps, but all of Jackson Park. It was hard for me to imagine street lamps as a wonder, but I smiled politely. It's pretty fantastic. It is, isn't it? And what if the lights only get brighter from here? Mr. Tesla could kill the night entirely, flush it away with his lamps. Wouldn't that be something? It sure would. We walked across a bridge into the huge electrical building, where a crowd was already gathering around a stage. She gasped and pulled on my arm. It's him. Nikola Tesla, dressed in a fine suit, was walking onto the stage. We couldn't hear him, well, from the back, but he introduced some of his inventions and gave a spiel advertising his alternating current electricity, reminding the audience how safe it was compared to Thomas Edison's direct current electricity. He then said something to someone off stage and reached his arms out. From 2 metal balls, streaks of lightning shot out, arcing into his fingertips. The audience gasped, then applauded. "Magnificent," the woman muttered as he left the stage. She grinned at me. "I'm guessing you haven't been on the Ferris wheel yet, have you?" I shook my head. "Next stop on the tour?" "Well, you have to see it. It's the 9th wonder of the world." "What's the 8th?" I asked. She pouted her lips. "Why, Mr. Eiffel's tower, of course. You know, they were originally going to just build a bigger tower here, but they wanted to make something special instead. I'm glad an American, like Mr. Ferris, stepped up." "Oh, yeah, I read a book about it." She squinted at me. "There's already a book about it?" It wasn't a very long book," I replied quickly. "Anyways, I forgot your name." She took a step back and held out a hand. "Charlotte Kaczynski." I shook it. "Josiah Moreland. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Moreland. Now let's go see the sky." The Ferris wheel's great motor rumbled to life, its great metal parts pulling and whirring as the wheel we sat on began to turn. We rose above the city, watching the smoke rise from the factories and ships sail on in the distance. The city was so dark, though, compared to the blinding light of the white city beneath us, the Columbian Exhibition. "It's beautiful," I said, unable to come up with anything better to say. "It is, isn't it? When I first arrived here, I was so lucky. This was one of the first sights in the city I got to see. People think of Chicago as dark and grimy, but when you see it from above, it's not like that at all. It's like a kitchen people are still using. It's lived in, filled with people doing what they have to do to get along in their lives. It's not grimy, it's life. And if that says anything about Chicago, it's saying the same thing about life." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I feel the same. Why'd you come to Chicago anyway?" She looked away from me, out the big glass windows of the Ferris wheel car. "My parents both got sick and died back in Missouri. My brother never really liked me or my parents, but he's paying me an allowance, and I couldn't stay in St. Louis. Too many memories. I thought I'd find a fresh start here." "Have you?" I asked, as lights appeared on the boats on the water. Even the lake was part of the night's festivities. "Sort of. Mr. Holmes' Hotel is a decent place to live, but I haven't made any friends here yet. It's lonely." My eyes went wide. "Excuse me. Did you say Mr. Holmes' Hotel?" She nodded. "Yeah, Mr. H.H. Holmes. He's a very nice man. A doctor, actually, and quite charming and handsome." "Do you know him?" I tried to think of how to explain this, if this was real, if I was really in 1890 and Charlotte was really staying in the hotel run by H.H. Holmes, the notorious serial killer. She was in serious danger, to say the least. I tried to think of the names of his victims, but none of them came to mind. "I know of him, and he's a scoundrel and a charlatan," I said. She jolted her spine upright. "Those are strong words to say about a reputable doctor when you're not even wearing proper clothes. Holmes isn't to be trusted. You can't stay with him tonight." "And who should I stay with? You?" Yes, you'd be far safer." She rose from her seat. "I'm sorry, Mr. Moreland, but I may be new to the city, but I'm not a rube. Mr. Holmes has been nothing but respectful to me, and your intentions do not sound trustworthy." The Ferris wheel finished turning, and she began to walk away into the exiting crowd. I bolted up to follow, but she spun to face me, pointing her finger at me. "And don't you dare follow." She kept walking to the crowd. "I'll call the Columbian Guard on you." I stood outside the Ferris wheel, unsure of what to do. I was in a city I knew, and yet didn't know at all. But I couldn't just let Charlotte get murdered. Then I saw the hot dog vendor. "Hey, you! Do you know where Dr. H.H. Holmes lives?" The hot dog vendor stopped rolling. "Ah, look, it's the guy who couldn't pay." Yes, but look, someone I know is in danger. Look, I know I couldn't pay before, but I just need to know this." I must have looked worried, as I felt, because he gave me the address. Southwest corner of South Wallace Avenue and West 63rd Street in Englewood. I ran, asking for directions along the way till I found the hotel. I barged in the door, startling someone waiting in the foyer, and barged past people till I came to an office labeled H.H. Holmes. I didn't hesitate. After trying the knob, I slammed into the door with my shoulder. I was surprised when the door casually opened. There in front of me was my friend Tom, holding a small oil lamp. "Josiah, I was wondering how long it would take you to make it in here." I'm afraid I already put Charlotte out. She's sleeping right now, so she won't hear us. Charlotte was sitting in a chair in front of Tom or Holmes's desk, her hand hanging down, a teacup shattered on the floor beneath her fingertips. Tom? What the hell's going on? He smiled and walked back behind his desk. I wanted you to see the city as it was, Joss. See it on the cusp of something golden. It'll never reach that, of course, as you know. And I know better than you. I've seen the future. But you can't be H.H. Holmes. I've read about him. I am him, and I'm also Tom. But H.H. Holmes is a serial killer. You're my friend. Tom waved me off. Only to your little mind. I'm a wizard, actually. And drinking the blood of the innocent in ritual keeps me perpetually young. It's a fantastic health regimen, honestly. I'd recommend it. You're saying, even in the modern day, I kill people, yes, but they weren't important people, Joss. That's what I'm trying to show you. He turned up the oil lamp on his desk. You're interesting. You could be my partner in this. In killing people and drinking their blood. Don't sound so offended. I can cast a spell and pop us around through time. When you see how people just age and die over and over again, well, you begin to realize how special they aren't. They just make the same mistakes over and over again, but I am special. And I'm more important than them. I don't believe you. I don't believe that you can take me back to the present. Oh, you don't, do you? He pulled out an amulet he always wore under his shirt and started fumbling with it. Well, maybe this will prove it to you. I walked forward, inquisitively as he messed with the pendant, and then listened as he called out an enchantment in some language I didn't know. Then I punched him in the face. He squealed, falling back into the table and knocking over the oil lamp. I reached onto his chest and pulled off the amulet, breaking the chain and stuffing it into my pocket. He tried to get up, and I swept his legs out from under him. The world was getting dark like it had when I traveled before. I grabbed Charlotte, picking her up from the chair, and tried to hustle through the darkening doorway. Joss, you can't leave me in the past. I can't stay here. It's boring here. Joss! I didn't look back. I realized the building was filling with smoke. The oil lamp had caught the floor on fire. Charlotte began to cough, and I was relieved she was awake, but scared she'd suffocate. What's going on? She said drowsily as I set her down. Hold my hand. We need to run. The building's burning. She nodded, and I pulled her along after me, out the door, into the darkening street. The smoke rolled down the road, and I felt Charlotte falling away from me, so I gripped her hand tighter and pulled her in close. The smoke cloaked us, and soon the world faded into the darkness. But then that darkness rolled away, and the man in the taxi was honking at us. Lovebirds, get out of the road! What do you think you're doing? Jerks. Charlotte looked around me. Where are we? I grimaced. Well, the good news is you're still in Chicago. The bad news is, well, that'll take some explaining. Thank you. All right. So, as you know, I write all of this show every month here with the Southgate Media Group and here at the Blue Box Cafe. So, I come all the way from Indianapolis, Indiana to do it. So if you feel like chipping in, we don't actually have a box up here yet, but we will at some point. So feel free to contribute a little bit to us to help us out making the show. Thank you. Yes, we now have a tip pitcher, so feel free to throw them in, and we can pour the donations right out. All right. Right. Okay. Not yet. So I managed to convince President Cleveland to sit down with us for a minute again to talk about the afterlife before he goes back to it. It's hard to keep ghosts around, so, welcome back to the ghost of U.S. President Grover Cleveland.
This mortal coil pains me, but I'm here.
I'm glad you could take the time to be with us.
Time means so little. It's mostly an illusion.
Great. So, Mr. President, how is the afterlife?
It's all right. It's very consecutive, though. Am I saying that correctly? Pause. Consecutive.
Don't drag me in my typo.
There we go. It's very consecutive, though. I sort of hoped there'd be more things breaking it up. Instead, it's just eternal happiness and then more eternal happiness, misspells and corrections. Yeah, it's such a downer.
Did you just say eternal happiness was a downer?
I did. You know, I've been keeping up with the United States since I died.
Oh, what do you think of it?
Do you really need me to explain how embarrassing it is for me to watch it right now?
Yeah, no.
But what really worked well was the MCR album, The Black Parade. You know, I had a hard time with rock and roll. I preferred some of the good, homespun music, but I think The Black Parade really changed that.
You, President Grover Cleveland, from the 1890s, like MCR.
Only a fool would doubt that.
Could you state that for the record?
I, President Grover Cleveland, would like to congratulate My Chemical Romance on creating the greatest album of all time, The Black Parade. Your service to our country will not be forgotten.
This is probably the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
So, what's your favorite album?
Oh gosh, probably David Bowie's Station to Station.
That's not even American, boy! And Bowie could never match the beautiful lyricism of Gerald Way. Good day, sir.
Mr. President.
I said good day, sir.
Well, on that note, I guess I'll go to one of this month's sponsors. The ghost of President Gerald Ford. We got a message from here, sent via Ouija board. Hello, America. This is the ghost of President Gerald R. Ford, writing to you with an important message. Other dead presidents might try to tell you that The Black Parade is the best album there is, but those dead presidents have clearly not listened to Beyoncé's 2008 album, I Am Sasha Fierce. President Cleveland may think he understands music, but he hasn't listened to real music. The American people need to know. Thank you for your time, and God bless the United States of America and Beyoncé. This has been a message from the ghost of former President Gerald R. Ford. All right, now we'll move on to our next segment. If we can get the transmission in. Yes, here we go. Coming to you live from an abandoned missile silo in the middle of nowhere, Utah, it's Monster Hunter Monthly. Hello, everyone. I'm your long-suffering host, Magpie Jones. Now, today's episode is a bit different. If you recall, the last few months, we've been following the journey from a group of monster hunters called the Sons of Suns, and their search to track down a fire-starting monster that changed back into a man after it turned things to ashes. We're going to be devoting our entire show today to their final message because, having received their letter, it looks like their journey has finally come to an end. So let's see them off properly, and let's begin. Letter from the Son of Suns. The creature was easy to follow, but hard to pin down. The fires were deep, and it left so many in its wake we had no questions that we were on its trail. But its trail was fast, and we could only follow. We tried to predict its path, but with little success. The houses it left in its wake, the scorched hotels, the charred bodies. We followed them, waiting for our chance, hoping. All we needed was an opportunity. My compatriots grew restless. We staked out our rests in an RV. After the beast burned down the hotel we stayed in, we couldn't chance that again. After all these months of travel, though, all the times we arrived just a little too late. It was pure luck we ran into it again when we did. After all our planning, all our searching, the final battle we'd waited for came at a time no one had planned for. We were in line for breakfast. We'd gotten in line, yawning and hoping for coffee, when the bathroom door opened. Someone came out who had been in the bathroom when we'd come in. They looked at us. They froze. We did too. We recognized each other and he ran. I bolted after him, losing my prime spot in the line, and shoved other customers out of the way. He was running to a car, and I knew I couldn't let him get into it. He reached into his pocket for his keys, and I screeched as hard and loud as I could. He fumbled, and the keys dropped to the ground as I charged him. He had two choices then, run or pick up the keys. He ran till we reached a wooden bridge. My compatriots, hearing the commotion, were running towards the bridge and had managed to get along the other side. He stopped. Finally, after all this running, he was blocked in. He panted. He looked for another option, and sweat poured from his face. He spun in place. I creeped closer. You don't have to keep running. We can do this easy. I wouldn't be hurting all these people if you just leave me alone. Just leave me alone, he yelled. We only found you because you hurt people. We're just trying to stop that. The sweat began evaporating, and he roared, fire shooting from his back and his clothes scorching off. The bridge lit up beneath him, and as it burned, I pulled out my pistol and shot him. He stumbled and caught his balance on a railing, but as the bridge burned, the railing cracked. He screamed as he tumbled down into the water, the river boiling and bubbling as he flailed in it, and then grew still. The fire department came and put the bridge out. We checked his body before we left to make sure he was gone, but we left the cleanup for other people. So we did right, I heard from the back seat as we drove away from town. We did what we had to do. He was a danger. The rest of the group looked out the window. We drove into the night without a fire to light our way. I suppose I don't know where we go from here, but I don't know if we ever did. Well, that was a cheery letter, wasn't it? Well, this has been Monster Hunter Monthly, and thank you for listening to the Journey of the Son of Suns. We'll be back next month with different letters and hopefully a new story that we can follow from another group of monster hunters somewhere else in the country. So till next month, don't die. All right. Now, we're going to enter into the next phase of our tales with a horror story. This is a little horror tale that we've culled from the Blue Light called The Man Trap. I mean, in the end, it made us stronger, Janine said. It did not make them stronger. She squeezed her husband's hand and smiled at Katie as hard as she could. Katie looked like she was trying very hard to not put on a facial expression. Great, Katie said with an inflection that said, we are talking more later. Derek smiled at Katie. Stronger together and happier than we've ever been. I need to use the bathroom, Katie said, looking at her friend. Janine followed, and as soon as the door closed, Katie spun and her teeth bared. Are you kidding me? You got back together with him? After everything he did? Janine ran her hand through her hair. He's changed, Katie. He changed in what, 2 weeks? Don't be snide. Derek had issues he needed to work through. So did I. She left him, didn't she? The 18-year-old he was bunking up with? Janine pouted her lips. That's not the point. Yes, it is. Oh, my God, he did. The 18-year-old left him, and he came back running to you like a little coward, and you took him back. Why would you take him back, Janine? He left you for a girl who's younger than any of your kids. Janine didn't meet her gaze anymore. She just stared at the tiled floor. You've let him walk all over you for, 25 years? I thought this would finally be the point where you stood up for yourself and just become Janine again. I am Janine, she whispered. You're Derek's servant. You should have told me you were bringing him to boot. I don't even want to see his face again. The bathroom door opened, and a pair of teenage girls entered in from the restaurant. Janine grabbed the edge of the door before it closed. I should get back to Derek. We've been in here a while. I'm leaving. I'm not watching you do this to yourself. Janine frowned. You haven't even finished your burger. Yeah, lost my appetite. You ever get things together? Yeah, but I'm not hanging out with Derek anymore. Bye, Janine. She walked out. Right out, without looking back at the table or getting a to-go box. Janine went back to the table. Derek raised an eyebrow. Family emergency. She had to go right away. She won't be back. Derek grinned. Awesome. I wanted the rest of her burger. As they lay in bed together that night, Janine rubbed his bare back as he snored. She'd been with him so long. They'd started dating in college, and now their own kids were there too. One of them even at their alma mater. The familiar bumps and curves under her fingertips brought her a reminder of why she was with him. Inch by inch, his skin was the purest statement of his love she could find. She knew this back. She'd run her hands along it more times than she could count. It was familiar, reassuring, except for that. Her hand stopped dead when she felt it. That wasn't there before. She knew it wasn't. The skin there felt different, slick, but not wet. She reached over to her nightstand and grabbed her phone, shining the light from it onto her husband's back. There it was, a small, swirling shape in faint blue. It wasn't upraised or indented into his skin, but perfectly level with it. Even so, it had a different texture. That blue swirl hadn't been there yesterday. Derek? She shook him lightly. Oh, he muttered. Did you get a tattoo? Oh, no, I hate tattoos. They're a waste of money. And then what's this on your back? He rolled over, grumpy, and as she reached under him, pressed on the swirl. What's this then? It looks like a tattoo. Derek groaned and leaned over to turn the bedside lamp on. Look, you see, it's nothing. You're imagining it. No, honey, you need to look in the mirror. It was even more noticeable in the stronger light. He seemed to finally take her seriously and walked into the bathroom, turning his head over his shoulder to look at his back in the mirror. He ran his fingers gently over the shape. Huh, he said. What the heck is that thing? Is it something that girl did to you? He looked back in anger. I thought we agreed we wouldn't talk about that. Janine pulled the covers up. I'm sorry, sweetie. I shouldn't have said anything. Come back to bed. The memory of how it started flooded back to her. I'm coming to you as a woman, the girl said. Janine walked back behind the counter, shaking her head. This couldn't be happening. The girl was 18. For some reason, Janine tried to reassure herself that the girl hadn't been younger than that, but then she felt sick just for thinking the thought. Derek and her had 4 children together. They'd been through 3 houses and 2 apartments in 4 cities, and now this teenager was in here flashing texts and pictures on her phone, and she said she was coming to her as a woman? Couldn't she have said anything else? She probably literally didn't know better than what she'd heard the line on TV. I'm so sorry. He told me he was divorced. That made him feel alive. That she was starting to tear up. Janine's feelings were all over the place. How could Derek do this? How could he do this to her? After all they'd been through, replace her with a newer model? The disregard for this girl was heinous, too. The idea that she wouldn't be clever enough to figure things out. The way he'd manipulated her, like he was luring into a trap. Did she even really know who Derek was? What would her kids say if they knew what their dad had done? The girl's name was Izzy. They hugged, both of them crying over too many things, and as Janine stroked Izzy's hair, she tried to put the future together. She yelled at him. They went to counseling. He yelled at her. They went to counseling. They came out of it together. But she still had so much left unsaid, unrealized, and now he had a tattoo that didn't feel like a tattoo. And he didn't know where he'd gotten it. She poured out 2 bowls of breakfast cereal the next morning, getting the milk out for Derek so he could choose his own amount. You know, honey, she called into the next room, I think we should take a vacation somewhere, go somewhere nice we haven't been before, make some new memories. What do you think? She waited for a reply, but none came. Screwing her lips up, she walked over to the doorway and poked her head through. Derek, are you even listening? Derek stood, his hand pressed against the wall next to the painting of Aaron Rodgers. He was naked, his back heaving as something long and snake-like moved beneath his skin, pushing it up an inch. The spiral was still there, but the blue was gone. The surface sunken in like whatever had been under it had slithered out. The skin on Derek's arm pulsed as whatever was under his skin moved down it, then back up, down his back, into his hips, around his leg. Janine put her hand over her mouth, trying to keep silent. His breathing was heavy, thick and wet, like he was taking breaths between sips of water. From his lip, at perfectly timed intervals with his breaths, a single blue droplet splattered down into a growing puddle on the floor that mixed with the sweat that had pooled around his feet. She pulled her hand away from her mouth and took a step closer to him. Derek? Derek, are you okay? Her hand shook, but she reached out towards her husband's back. She touched his skin. It was slick and sticky. Whatever was coming out of his pores wasn't sweat. Janine, he said, you're old. She pulled her hand back. We both are. We've been together so long. So long. So long you've held me down here. What are you talking about? He rasped. Holding me back. If this was only a few hundred years ago, I would have been a king. I would have rode across the plains and men would cower before me. I would have cleaven the weak in two and taken their women. No rules would have stopped me aside from the rule of might. Age, decency, love, they just hold back men like me. I'm a stallion, Janine, and I deserve better than you. Janine took a step back, her bare feet suddenly much more aware of how cold the floor beneath them was. My ancestors used to raid villages, and I can feel their blood in me. You and that girl, that is it. You've wronged me by denying me my right to you. Not that I want you anymore. You've shriveled old. She slapped him. Hard. Janine didn't even realize she'd taken the swing. Her hand came away stinging and damp. Derek looked shocked, hurt, confused, but then he looked angry. The thing under his skin roiled. He punched her in the face. Her nose cracked and bled down it. You should run, you old hag. She ran. Derek barreled after her, yelling loudly, his wet feet slapping on the floor. Janine turned a corner sharply and he barreled into a wall. She expected him to shrug it off and keep after her, but the sound of running stopped. She turned to see him collapsed on the floor, his chest still heaving, the thing below his skin coiling up on top of his back. He began to spasm, his limbs flailing, foam seeping out from his mouth, and his back burst open in a spray of skin and blood. A thing came out. It was blue, with thin, smooth skin, its limbs long and gangly. It had no head, only a hole at the top of its purse-like torso, filled with a circle of uneven, seemingly random teeth. It crawled on all fours, its slippery body proving difficult on the hardwood floors. Janine grabbed the first thing she could see, a statue of Susan B. Anthony that was also a nutcracker, and creeped up on the thing that had come out of her husband. It slowly walked down the hallway as though it was drunk. She lifted the statue up and slammed it down on the blue thing. The thing squealed as she hit it and began to scamper away. Janine ran back to the kitchen to grab her cell phone and called 911. By the time the ambulance and police arrived, Derek had bled out. Janine sat in the ambulance, her nose wrapped in a bandage, as the police officer interviewed her. He was in his early 30s, but was nearly completely bald by natural means. A mustache right out of the 1970s was stuck on his lip. So, you're saying the animal burst out of his back? That's exactly what I'm saying, officer. I have no idea what it was or how it got inside. It was like nothing I've ever seen before. And you still think it's inside the house? It has to be. The house is completely sealed for energy efficiency. That's important, you know. She stared over his shoulder for most of it. She wasn't even sure what to make of what happened. The officer nodded, reassured her they'd take care of things, and stepped out. What do you think, sir? Constable Sarah Riley asked. She shook her head. It's clearly hysterical. I don't know how her husband died. It's like nothing I've seen before, but I think she was responsible somehow. Sarah looked skeptical. It seemed like something pretty clearly clawed its way out of his back. We didn't want to follow the bloody paw prints because animal control can't make it here because they're... He waved her off. Animal control. What a bunch of wusses. I'll go deal with the dumb thing, if there even is something there. Anyone asks if I went in there alone, you tell them the thing was trying to get out, and I chased it back in there. Clear? Sarah pursed her lips. I said, am I clear? You're clear, sir. Good, he muttered and cocked his gun, walking to the house. It was enough to follow the bloody trail. It had hid and then scampered up into the bedroom. He gently eased the door open and saw the thing, just as Janine had described, its bag-like body inflating and deflating with every breath. Its spindly limbs scampered to circle so the mouth faced him. He suddenly felt emasculated, small and weak. He joined the police force to feel big, but he got the sense that hundreds of years ago he would have been a king. The blue thing gurgled, and he walked towards it. Did you kill the thing, sir? Sarah asked as he walked out. He shook his head. Yeah, there's nothing in there, just like I said. You searched the whole house? He growled at her. Of course I did. Who do you think I am? She held up her hands defensively. All right there. Someone's got a bit too much testosterone today. He lunged forward and grabbed her face. Never too much. Why don't you give me a kiss? Sarah reached into her belt, pulled something out, and then tasered him. He fell over, moaning, and she ran into the house, following the bloody tracks up the stairs. The blue thing scampered to face her, and she drew her pistol. It squealed, and she shot it 4 times. The thing screeched and bubbled, dissolving into a blue goo, melting into a liquid, and forming a blue spiral on the white bedsheets. The room smelled terrible. Sarah pinched her nose and walked out. We'll have to have that cleaned up special. It's toxic in there. Janine, Katie, and Sarah sipped on their teas while they waited for Izzy to arrive. I'm proud of her. She's getting good grades in her chemistry courses this semester, Janine said. Of course she is, Katie muttered. I'm tutoring her. Sarah put her drink down and shook her head. I'm glad we're meeting up like this, but I still have no idea what that thing was we encountered. It wasn't natural. Janine shrugged. We're alive, and we're at a pancake house, so that's all that really matters. So, have you figured out what you're gonna do now? Sarah asked. I'm thinking about taking a vacation. A long vacation, somewhere nice and peaceful. Maybe the French countryside. Ooh, that would be nice. Oh, there's Lizzie. They greeted the younger woman as the waiter came over to take their orders, their laughter spilling out into the night. Thank you. Today's episode of Tales by the Blue Light has been brought to you by that book you stole from your school because you always thought you'd read it. You never did, but you probably never gave her back either. That book isn't even on the curriculum anymore. You never read it, and you probably never will read it. That book hasn't sure forgotten about you. Where is it now? In a box? On your shelf? Do you still see it occasionally? It sees you. It hasn't forgotten what you did, that you took it. The book is waiting. Watching. It wants you to know that it won't forget. So either read the book or just donate it, guys, or else. This has been brought to you by that book that you stole from your school because you always thought you'd read it. Thank you for your sponsorship. All right. So we're now entering in. We've gotten done with our fantasy story, with our horror story, which means we have one more tale for the night. Our science fiction adventure. After that's the radio play. So, here we go. We have a little sci-fi adventure here we're calling The Battle of Io Pass. This one will feature some characters you might have met if you were here a few weeks ago. So we'll get going. Chin Thoy sighed as the last of the cargo was siphoned in from the Auto Cargo Plus Mark 23 drone. The battleship Rook had finished another act of petty piracy. Chin hid the scowl she wanted to unfurl like a carpet wrapped around a sword onto the floor of the bridge. You're upset, Spaceman Thoy. She jolted her head towards Petty Officer Isaac Frakes. No, sir. He walked closer to her. It's okay, Spaceman. You can speak freely. Sir, when I joined this endeavor, with a promise of being a part of the Martian Navy if it was ever commissioned to fight for our freedom against Centro Systems, sure, I joined it to stop piracy, not take part in it. He nodded, frowning. The Admiral has determined that this is the best course of action for the fleet. If we can't continue getting the supplies to support the fleet, we can't defend Mars when the call comes to Io. She pursed her lips. Yes, sir, but the Admiral, she isn't one of us. Well, honestly, I'm not exactly sure where she's from. I mean, she's some sort of rimward from somewhere. Admiral Callisto is from Oberon, specifically the lost city of Zanzibar. She squinted at him. You're making that up. There's no place called the lost city of Zanzibar. If it's called the lost city of Zanzibar, how would you have found it? Thoy squinted at him. He shook his head. It's a real place. It was a very early rim colony, self-sustaining, but its entry got deleted from the Central Archives hundreds of years ago. It's just like if you got a place that you go to and it got deleted from your GPS, no one's going to find it. And it stayed secluded from the rest of the solar system until only a few decades ago. And they're pretty weird, even for rimwords. Well, that explains a lot, Thoy muttered. What was that? Nothing, sir. She trailed off. She noticed something on her readings, something far off. She adjusted her sensors and then double-checked it. Petty Officer, the Admiral needs to see this at once. The Admiral had been staring at the hologram for a full minute, her aides standing in silence. Well, tight good, is it? She said. Commander Rouge tried not to cringe as he spoke. Yes, ma'am. It appears to be Admiral Talon's Centro Jupiter Mining Defense Force. They're probably here looking for the ships that we've been destroying. The Admiral stroked her chin and then pulled up a step stool to get a closer look at the map. Commander Rouge still hadn't gotten used to how small she was. The Admiral's eyes darted over the map. Commander, you ever know Mozzie Ha's maneuvering? She shook her head. No, Admiral, I don't believe we learned that at the Academy. Might work, no, might weigh a bit too risky. She paced the room. A whole center fleet, that ain't a small ding. The best option here, Admiral, is to run. Move the fleet away from Io and salvage what we can, Captain Marconi said. If we letting them into Io, may as well let them into Mars and kiss it to toes. Now, that ain't what I'd be looking to do. Saving the fleet, even if we lose ships under construction, and the colony, the Admiral spun on him. Her mechanical eye glowed red. I told you, we ain't leaving you folk to dying. Capiche? He nodded. Callisto turned back to display. How do senses work? Commander Rouge cleared her throat. Ensign Thoy, who spotted the fleet, could explain that best. All eyes turned to Thoy, whose shoulders bunched up as they did so. Yes, Commander. The Centaurus centers use the same software as ours. With how much stuff is in space, a lot of our detection relies on heat signatures. So, saying if we used artificial gravity on the ships, so we could bounce in and off them degrees instead of engines. Wouldn't be looking like them debris. I'm sorry, Admiral. I don't know what you just asked. Commander Rouge stepped in. She's asking if we use the artificial gravity generators to bounce the ship off of the debris in the rims of this planet, presumably turning the engines off if we'd be invisible. Thoy's eyes widened. We would be. Admiral Juniper Callisto grinned. Well then, we got a battle to prepare. Admiral Melinda Talon squinted, and the display screen reacted to her body language and zoomed in on the derelict cargo drone. Captain, what sort of readings are we getting from the craft? Admiral, we're getting a distress beacon from it. The captain jolted back as he spoke. What do you mean? We haven't gotten any distress calls from any of the cargo drones that have gone missing in the last few months. Admiral, it looks like we're in a dead zone. We can't communicate outside this cluster of debris. We're getting our own signals sent back to us. Our sensors are bouncing around the ring detritus like crazy. Some of the clusters are just far closer than you'd normally expect and much more magnetically and radioactive. There are sensor ghosts everywhere. We'll have to rely on visual checks. Talon frowned. Visual checks were a terrible way to keep track of things in space by themselves. It's just too big. Does the drone still have its cargo pods? Captain Galway nodded. Yes, ma'am. We're communicating with it right now. It looks like the drone has gotten itself an assault circle. Talon hadn't heard the term before. Explain. Like supernatural beings and myths. You get stuck in an assault circle, it can't move out. The drone is being fooled by its own rules, so it can't move. The drones are programmed to follow the direction central buoys beam to them and not move following other orders. But they also have directions to follow in case they need to get to safety if they're out of comm range, if they can't communicate with another central craft. The problem is the drone can communicate with another central craft because the messages bounce back to itself over and over. So it can't get to safety, but it can't get its next set of instructions, so instead it just shuts down. It's good we caught this. This place is sort of like a Bermuda Triangle in space. Dock with a drone. We need to inspect it and tow it out of here, Talon ordered. Yes, ma'am. Talon paced the consoles. Something was wrong here. She couldn't place her finger on it. Her flagship eased up to the side of the drone and vacuum seals were made. Admiral, some of the other ships are reporting that some of the debris is drifting off close to them, an ensign yelled. Talon rolled her eyes. Have them take evasive maneuvers. They don't need orders for that. Yes, Admiral. It hit her suddenly, and it seemed so obvious. The debris. What it did. Its placement in its space lane. Captain, what do you say the likelihood that this specific variety of debris is coming here into this configuration and then remaining here for 5 months without dispersing? Captain Galway stroked his chin. It's nearly miraculous, Admiral. I've never seen anything like it, but it's clearly happened. Talon ran over to the display. The debris floating around in the darkness wasn't all rock. Her heart started racing. Even as she gave the next order, she felt her palms begin to sweat. It was going to be too late. Disengage from the drone. This is a trap. Admiral, Captain, that is an order. All ships, what had started to look like chunks of metal ore from an unexamined distance, roared to life. Fighters and boarding ships spinning out of them in spirals. Then those same chunks, far too close for textbook combat, accelerated towards the ships of the Jupiter Mining Defense Fleet. They clamped onto their hulls, and landing ships careened into their unshielded bays that had been opened to begin collecting stray and valuable cargo. Talon struggled to think of what to do. Memories of her failure on Europa all those years ago flooded back to her. All those soldiers who died because when her plan went south, she couldn't adjust it. She tried to think of what to do. She saw Kate Blank's smiling face as she presented her with her new Admiral insignia. She saw her husband, happy for her, but confused why she wanted to go back out in space. She saw the document she'd let Kate steal that had made the conflict with Mars a siege and not just a sneak attack by Centro. And she saw the red lights flashing in front of her. We're being boarded! Admiral, the drone was filled with attackers! Pirates? She asked hopefully. The captain looked at the report and looked at it with her pale-faced. Martians, ma'am. Battle stations! Everyone! They can't do this! It's an act of war! It's suicide! An ensign yelled, pulling at her hair. This can't be happening! I can't die! I can't die here! Ensign! Calm down and get back to your station. We need to... They've taken control of the Charlemagne, Admiral. Already? This was all happening too fast. Or was she too slow? Talon swooned, stumbling to her right. This couldn't be happening. Launch all fighters. Order all ships. They're coming up the lifts, Admiral. They've disabled the launch tubes for our fighters. They're cutting off our access to the systems. Admiral, Commander Chanis is asking for permission to surrender. The boarders have taken her bridge. All eyes turned to Talon. She took halting breaths. She should have kept her desk job. It couldn't end like this. Not like this. She'd lost without firing a shot, without even knowing she was in a duel. She tried to make her throat form the words. In a rasping voice, she said them once, then repeated them louder a second time, with the full forced confidence she could. All ships stand down. The battle is over. All ships stand down. The battle is over. There was silence on the bridge. Some of the crew covered their faces in shame. Admiral, we're being hailed. It's the Martian, Admiral. Talon gave an accepting gesture. Put them on. The image of a woman Talon had seen plenty of times before came onto the screens. It was a face she'd seen on countless reports of heists, hostage situations, robberies, and the reports of her defeat and annihilation of her fleet by Centro Admiral Cornelia Carthage. Her mechanical eye and the filled-in metal line down her face, the long black braid, neater than it had ever been. Now, though, the villainous criminal, noted former pirate queen Juniper Callisto, stared back at Talon through the view screen, wearing an official uniform of the Martian military. I be Admiral Juniper Callisto of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Mars. I be coming up for you, except you surrender post hastily. Be preparing to receive of me, and then my crew mine for negotiations of the terms and such. If you don't shoot me peeps, you'll be fine enough. Talon stared. She understood most of that, at least. She'd been beaten by Juniper Callisto? She was the Martian Admiral? Talon seethed, hating her own failure more, loathing that rimward scum in front of her. Despite everything, she betrayed little of her feelings. I'll be ready to receive you to negotiate terms. The feed shut off. She turned to the comm officer. Is there any way we can get a communication out to anything Centro-friendly? The officer shook his head. I'm afraid not, ma'am. Even if we still had full control of our systems, we can't get anything out of this trap. It looks like a lot of the interference is man-made. You didn't realize that before, she scathed. No, ma'am, I wasn't expecting to see it, so I didn't look. Of course he didn't. And she hadn't seen it either. Of course this wasn't a natural phenomenon. Of course it wasn't. All she could do now was wait for Admiral Callisto. Just thinking of the name made her retch, and hope she was kind. The applause followed Juniper Callisto down the entire walk from the bridge of her flagship, all the way to the bridge of the captured Centro flagship. The Martian soldiers began singing their national anthem, Our Ochre Home, as she walked, waving their helmets and hats in the air. When she passed the groups of Centro spacemen and soldiers they'd rounded up, hands on their heads, the captive stared at her in wonder, fear, or hatred. Sometimes all of the above. As she stepped into the lift to the enemy bridge with her guards and her staff, one of them turned to her. If I might say, Admiral, that was truly exemplary. I've never even heard of an admiral capturing an entire enemy fleet before. Our boarding party losses were exceedingly low, even, Commander Rouge said. Aye, but you wouldn't be saying that to their mums and pa's, would you? I'd be done proud of this, but I ain't be losing my perspective. She looked up at Rouge. She was a full foot and a half taller than her. I know you Martians ain't been a keen height mile than me, but your folk and I always do my best for y'all. She stretched her arms out and cracked her fingers, then rolled her neck. She shook her saber to make sure it was secure at her side. All right, then, let's be talking. The bridge had already been secured when she walked in, of course. Martian soldiers had checked every member of the bridge crew for weapons, and the path of the Admiral would walk for traps. It was time for civilized dealings. Juniper took a deep breath and timed her first step. She would come through the door boldly as it opened. Juniper couldn't help but treasure the sudden respect. Melinda Talon was surprised at how small Juniper Callisto was in person. It wasn't just that she was short, she'd read her dossier, but how little her body was overall. She was simply a tiny human being. She strolled towards Talon confidently, stopping right in front of her. As Admiral of the Martian Fleet, I accept your surrender and am here to negotiate terms, Callisto said, slowly and carefully, trying to get the words right. Talon tried not to cringe. She knew she spoke some weird pigeon speak from the rim. I hope to come to terms that will ensure the safety of my crews. I will expect no less, Callisto replied. Look, Talon said, leaning in closely to Callisto's ear. I'm important to your side. There's things you might not know about yet. I'm the one who let the plans for the assault on the Martian city of Tikhonograd leak so the Martian Congress could escape. That was me. And I'm willing to give more information to you. So we're on the same side here, you and I. My crew are loyal Centro, so do with them what you wish, but you need to take me back with you. She pulled back to find Callisto staring at her, mouth agape, a muscle in her cheek twitching. You're telling me you've been traitoring your own folk? The old dame's been tomfooled by you. Talon nodded. That's what I'm saying. I support the Martian cause, or at least she would have to now. And you're saying I can do it with your crew. Aye, but keep that down. Callisto held her gaze, and then in one swift motion, leaned down, drew her sword, leapt vertically, and decapitated Centro Admiral Melinda Talon. It was a fraction of a moment. Talon didn't even feel the cut. But she knew it happened. For the few seconds her head stayed alive as it dropped to the floor. She saw Kate Blank, saw her husband, saw her children. She heard one last thing. You traitorous blood-sucking bat! You didn't deserve these folks' loyalty! The bridge crew reeled. Some covered their eyes. Admiral Talon's lifeless body bled out into the carpet. Now, I be telling you a thing. Maybe you believe, maybe you're not. But I tell it to you true. She wiped Talon's bullet off on the hem of her black coat and stepped over Talon's body. Your girl here just tried to sell you down the river. Now that ain't something I'd be taking kindly to, you hear. I might have been a pirate by having me honor, and I never tried to no one unjust, so I'd be taking your life in my hands. I can't be all sending you home, not with the war coming, but we be taking you all back to Aya where our fleet be. Y'all be fed, y'all be housed, but if y'all try to play funny, there be consequences. Do nothing, we do nothing to you, and I make sure that y'all's whole fleet be knowing that. She turned and walked back to the lift. Commander Rouge fiddled with the tablet. Ma'am, are you sure we should take this whole fleet as captives? We'd be taking this fleet for our own use, no worrying about that. I might even have to shift me flagship. I mean, keeping the Centro spacemen as prisoners, it's a big use of our resources. She looked at her disappointed. If that's your attitude, mate, then what's the good fighting for your revolution on Mars anyway, if you're not going to be better than them? The door opened, and she continued on her walk. On the bridge, Ensign Thoy rose to salute the Admiral. The rest of the bridge followed suit. At ease, mates. Admiral, Ensign Thoy said, may I say something? Speak freely, missy. Thoy took a deep breath. I just wanted to say it's an honor to serve under you. Callisto smiled. If you got honor, I'd be telling you, it's all mine here. No one would know they won except the Martian High Command. No one would even know there was a battle here until the war ended. Admiral Talon simply vanished, her ships and crew a mystery. Juniper Callisto prepared her fleet in secret for the bigger fight, and every day, when her aides came into her office, they saw the shining, white, polished skull of a Centro Admiral grinning on her desk. Thank you. All right. So, every month here on Tales by the Blue Light, we end off with a little radio play. So we've got some performers here to help us out.
Now I'm actually up.
There's another mic behind you, too. Okay, there's another mic behind you. Down here.
Yes.
So you're playing Al?
What am I? P? P money?
Yes, and I'll do F, and I'll also, I guess, do T. Professor Maestros and Lady Escopius. All right, you guys ready?
Check.
Yes.
All right.
The mail.
Charge.
All right. Here we go. So, today we have a little radio play we're calling Lady Escopius and the Adventure of Dystopia. Hello. I'm a factory of crystal. You might think that means I'm a factory, but actually, it means I'm really a fancy spaceship. Yeah, look, I didn't choose the name. I'm in charge of carting around Lady Escopius. You may have heard of some of her adventures before. She travels around. Well, I'm not sure she really has any sort of long-term goals, but she sure does like to travel, and that gets her into trouble more often than not, like today.
Factory, where are we?
You flew me here, Lady Ace.
Well, yes. I wasn't looking that closely.
At space?
There's not a lot to look at when you think about it.
It looks like we're on the edge of the solar system. It's some kind of asteroid.
Is there atmosphere?
Surprisingly, yes.
Then let me hop off. And you can shrink down and follow me around.
Sure.
Whew. All right. There we go. Now let's take a look around. There's clear signs. People have been living here.
You mean the half-eaten pizza?
Of course I mean that. That clearly shows that people lived here.
And they still do.
Who are you?
You don't recognize me? Well, I suppose this is a new body. I like the eyebrows quite a bit.
State your name.
My dear Lady Escopius, I'm your good old Professor Maestros, your old arbiter of education who taught you in school.
You punished me cruelly.
Well, yes.
Who constantly is trying to change history, control minds, and take over place.
Trying is a bit rude.
What are you doing here?
My dear pundit, you're on the moon of dystopia.
That's very poetic. But if you could just say what you mean.
I mean, that's literally what the natives called this asteroid.
And where are they? That's their pizza, isn't it?
No, Lady Ask, that's my pizza.
I think you were expecting that to be a bigger reveal than it was.
Fair enough.
Where are the people here, though? Isn't this a colony?
It was a colony. The people here decided, though, that they would live as a dystopia. Maybe I won't have to explain what happened here.
I know what you're doing.
Perhaps. I'll let the loser explain.
Oh, more people. Well, hi. I'm guessing you want me to play the game. I'll probably be the loser again then, too.
The game? What game? Where are the people?
They won.
Won what?
Look, you're clearly new here, so I'll explain. We have elections here. This year we had a new party join us, the People for Being Thrown into a Contained and Eternal Black Hole Party. It got really popular. We had all these meetings and debates and rallies, and I was the candidate for the We Should Eat Lunch party. I lost.
You can't be serious. A political party based on throwing people into a contained and eternal black hole?
I tried making the argument that doing things that would kill you, but the opposition just made fun of me and said I was asking for handouts because I didn't want to be thrown into a contained and eternal black hole. But now no one's left and I can't throw myself into a black hole myself. They just willingly got thrown into a black hole? They voted for it. It was democratic.
See, Lady Ask, not my doing this time.
Did you convince them that this was a good idea?
I'm not responsible for what other people do. I am not their babysitter.
We all have a responsibility to our neighbors, and convincing them that being thrown into a black hole isn't a good idea. Isn't responsible. Actually, it's evil. It's murder.
Well, it's too bad that you see it that way.
Lady Ace, that's his own factory of crystal. He's getting into it. He's getting away. Should we go after him?
We'll never catch him. Well, loser, we can take you anywhere you want to go. No point in you staying here. No point in you staying here.
Thanks. I guess anywhere's better than here.
But this isn't over, Professor Maestros. You can run, but one day I'll catch you.
So we took the loser to Mars, which is a nice place. They built a theme park there, and we're flying off to our next adventure. So remember, kids.
The moral of the story is,
if someone tries to convince you that throwing yourself into a contained and eternal black hole is a good idea,
just say no.
All right, so that's all for tonight from the Blue Light. Come back next month where we'll be sure to offer you more tales of fantastic into the darkest depths of your horror, the brightest flights of your fancy, and the shiniest dreams of your future. From all of us here at the Blue Box Cafe in Elgin, Illinois, keep your light shining. There's plenty more to see.